Starting with the chapter number 2 of History, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Before moving ahead to the chapter, let's proceed to the learning outcomes of the chapter. Learning outcome simply means that what all will the children be able to understand and comprehend after reading the chapter. So after we read the chapter, we will be able to link the revolution of 1905 with the founding of the Duma. What was Duma? Duma was nothing but just the parliament. We will also see how war led to the February and October revolutions. We can link the exit of the Russians from World War I to chaos going on in Russia itself during that period. We will be able to explore the history of socialism through the study of the Russian Revolution. Also, we can demonstrate an in depth knowledge of the history of the Soviet Union and Russian Revolution, critically evaluate key interpretations of the social, cultural, and political history of Russia in the 20th century, conduct research analysis and integrate primary and secondary sources and present the research in written form at an advanced level, demonstrate the significance of Soviet history for the contemporary world. Please note that the point of conduct research, analysis, and so on is for the teachers if they want to conduct an activity related to the chapter. For the students, the remaining points has to be covered in the chapter. Now moving ahead to the reading of the chapter along with the quick explanation. Along with going to the text, we will also go through the this PPT, a quick PPT. So, firstly, in this chapter, what all we are going to learn? The age of the topics covered basically, the age of social change, which includes liberals, radicals, and conservatives with their ideologies, industries and social change, socialism in Europe, which includes Robert Owen, Louis Blanc, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Engels. Then support for socialism, SDP, that is Social Democratic Party, Labour Party in Britain, and Socialist Party in France. Also, the Russian Revolution, economy and society, socialism in Russia, including the Russian Socialist Democratic Labour Party, division of Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Then the 1905 Revolution, Bloody Sunday, which includes St. Petersburg, Father Gapon, elected consultative parliament or Duma, the First World War in the Russian Empire, the February Revolution in Petrograd, including the events and the effects. Similarly, for October Revolution, the Civil War, making of a socialist society, Stalin and socialist society, Stalin in collective farming, and a global influence. If we read through the chapter, then it says that in the previous chapter you read about the powerful ideas of freedom and equality that circulated in Europe after the French Revolution. The French Revolution opened up the possibility of creating a dramatic change in the way in which society was structured. As you have read before, the 18th century was broadly divided into estates and orders, and it was the aristocracy and church which controlled social and economic power. Suddenly, after the revolution, it seemed possible to change this. In many parts of the world, including Europe and Asia, new ideas about individual rights and who controlled social power began to be discussed. In India, Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Derozio talked of the significance of the French Revolution, and many others debated the ideas of post revolutionary Europe. The developments in colonies in turn reshaped these ideas of societal change. In the paragraph, we first talk about the values that we have inherited from the French Revolution, what all we had learnt. So talking about the French Revolution, it had taught us about the liberty, fraternity, equality, and the democratic rights. Also, we have studied it how the society was structured. We've already read that the monarch and the church power already controlled the social and economic power, and society was divided into three estates, namely first, second, and third, wherein it included kings, higher nobility, clergy, lower nobility, and all the other peasants, workers, businessmen, women, etc., respectively. So it was the aristocracy and church who controlled the social and economic powers. Aristocracy refers to the monarch power. So in many parts of the world, new ideas began to be discussed, and also Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Derozzi talked of the significance of French Revolution from India. Now coming to the introduction portion, so this lesson throws light on the coming of socialism in Europe and the dramatic events that forced the ruling monarch Tsar Nicholas to give up power. One can see how the ideals of socialism brought about Russian Revolution. Remember that this word uh, this word is pronounced as Tsar Nicholas, not Tsar Nicholas. Okay, so it had Tsar Nicholas II who had give up the power. Now coming to the age of social change, what I have just read is just summarized here. The French Revolution opened up the possibility of creating a dramatic change to society. People were conservatives, liberals, or radicals, and all of them had the different responses, from those who accepted that some change was necessary but wished for a gradual shift, to those who wanted to restructure society radically, which means fast. So, what all actually these terms meant, liberals, radicals, and conservatives? What separated these strands of politics and what linked them together? We must remember that these terms do not mean the same thing, that it do not mean the same thing in all contexts or at all times. So, we will look briefly at some of the important political traditions of the 19th century and see how they influenced change. Then we will focus on one historical event in which there was an attempt at a radical transformation of society through the revolution in Russia. Socialism became one of the most significant and powerful ideas to shape society in the 20th century. The way French Revolution gave us many ideas, similarly, socialism also became one of the most prevalent, significant, and powerful ideas which we have learned from the Russian Revolution. So, Europe had liberals, radicals, and conservatives. Talking about liberals in brief, liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all religions. They were against the uncontrolled power of the dynastic rules. They wanted rights for individuals. They argued for an elected parliamentary government subject to laws interpreted by a well trained judiciary that was independent of rulers and officials. They were not Democrats because they did not believe in the universal adult franchise. So, from the textbook as well, these points are picked. So, one of the groups which looked to change society were the liberals. Liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all religions. They were in favor of the privileges. Also, remember that they were in favor of the privileges of great landowners and wealthy factory owners, while radicals were not so. So, what were the changes mainly demanded by liberals? We are just briefing out the text in the textbook. So, the changes demanded by liberals were a nation tolerating all religions, wanted to safeguard the rights of individuals against governments ruled by dynastic rulers as per their will. They opposed the uncontrolled power of dynastic rulers. Men of property should have vote, were not Democrats and not believed in universal franchise, and also not supported women voting. Also, moreover, in the text, it has been simply stated that Britain favored the Church of England, Austria, and Spain, and favored the Catholic Church. So, Church of England was the original church, the third largest Christian church after the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Liberal Church. So, and also the Catholic Church were nothing but just the Anglican Committee and Catholic Church were the largest Christian churches. So, just that much you need to remember, nothing else about it. So, we have already talked about, okay, then what do you mean by dynastic rulers? Dynastic rulers simply mean rule of royal family. So, they had certain arguments and they had certain desires which we need to talk about. Coming to the text, so till here they also did not want to vote for women. We have already discussed. Coming to their arguments and demands. So in contrast, radicals. Okay, these are the pointers of radicals. So what were the arguments made by them? Arguments were that they argued for a representative elected parliamentary government subject to laws interpreted by a well-trained judiciary that was dependent of rulers and officials. They felt that men of property mainly should have the right to vote. They also argued that they did not want the vote for women, that is, they do not supported equality in those terms. Their desires were that they wanted a nation where it tolerated all religions. They opposed the uncontrolled power of dynastic rulers and wanted to safeguard the rights of individuals. So these were the differences in the liberals' desires and the arguments. Coming to the radicals. So radicals wanted a nation in which government was based on majority of country's population. It was again one of the demand. So many supported women's suffragette movements. What was suffragette movement? It is also given in your text that it is a movement to give women the right to vote. So unlike liberals, they opposed the privileges of great landowners and wealthy factory owners. They were not against the existence of private property but disliked concentration of property in the hands of a few. We will try to understand this particular line, that they were not against the existence of private property but disliked concentration of property in the hand of a few. It simply meant that they had no problem in, suppose if I am one of them and I had the private property, they had no problem in them, but they had the problem that I have the entire property and it is not shared among others. So that's what the problem was for the radicals. Then conservatives, they opposed to liberals and radicals after the French Revolution. However, even conservatives had opened their minds to the need for change. Earlier in the 18th century, conservatives had been generally opposed to the idea of change. By the 19th century, they accepted that some change was inevitable but believed that past had to be respected and change had to be brought through a slow process. So they accepted that some change was inevitable, means it had to be there, it had to be brought down, and it cannot be stopped. So they wanted change in its society only after the French Revolution, after 18th century, and they wanted a gradual shift, not a radical change. Such differing ideas about societal change clashed during the social and political turmoil that followed the French Revolution. The various attempts at revolution and national transformation in the 19th century helped define both the limits and potential of these political tendencies. Also, till now, many of you must be in doubt that was actually socialism. What do you mean by socialism? Just remember, socialism is nothing but just the sharing of profits and the ownerships. We will quickly have a look at the brief notes. Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. So, new ideas in Europe and Asia, individuals' rights and who controlled social power. New ideas emerged from revolutions and the colonies. Political traditions of 19th century. First, liberals, radicals, and conservatives. The ideologies: religion not to be followed, individual rights but no voting rights, representative parliamentary government, only men of property can vote. Radicals wanted government based on majority of country's population, supported women's right to vote, suffragette movement, and conservatives opposed to liberals and radicals but became ready for change. They also respected the part and wanted the change to be there. Okay. Then coming to again to the text and the PPT as well. So, talking in brief about the demands of radicals and conservatives, radicals wanted a nation in which government was based on majority of a country's population. They disliked concentration of property in hands of few, not the existence of private property. Conservatives resisted change. After the revolution, they started accepting change provided it was slow and had links and respected the past. Now we will talk about industries and social change. So, talking about briefly, industrial socialists created condition for change, unemployment change like unemployment, poverty, poor hygiene, all property was with radicals and liberals. So, coming to the text as well. So, along with the text, if we go, then it had firstly told us about the new time changes. So, these political trends were sign of a new time. It was a time of profound social and economic changes. It was a time when cities came up and new industrialized regions developed, railways expanded, and the Industrial Revolution occurred. Now, there were certain issues that had brought about it. So, what were those issues? We will discuss briefly, then we will go through the PPT and the text. So, issues faced were basically it was faced by the common people. Liberals, radicals searched for the solutions. Also, what were the issues? Housing and sanitation went down, growth of town was more, uh, and work has increased but wage has lower down, unemployment has increased, and demand for industrial goods has been decreased. This is what we are told here. So let us study now. Industrialization brought men, women, and children to factories. Work hours were often long and wages were poor. Unemployment was common, particularly during times of low demand and for industrial goods. Housing and sanitation were problems since towns were growing rapidly. Liberals and radicals searched for solutions to these issues. This is a picture which shows the London poor in the mid 19th century as seen by a contemporary. So now almost all industries were the property of individuals. Liberals and radicals themselves are often property owners and employers. Having made their wealth through trade or industrial ventures, they felt that such effort should be encouraged, that its benefit would be achieved if the workforce in the economy was healthy and citizens were educated. So it had simply told us that all industries, they merely wanted that rather than an educated healthy workforce that is privileged by birth, individual effort should be praised, and it will help making individuals free and poor could labor, then societies would only develop. So further it had said that opposed to the privileges the old aristocracy had by birth, they firmly believed the value of individual effort, labor, and enterprise. If freedom of individuals was ensured, if the poor could labor and those with capital could operate without restraint means any control or any supervision or any pressure over them, they believed that societies would develop. Many working men and women who wanted changes in the world rallied around liberal and radical groups and parties in the early 19th century. What I told before was the liberals and radicals belief that is told in this paragraph. Then we talk about the nationalists, liberals, and radicals. So, who were the nationalists? You can come to know here that nationalists were no one but just the liberals and radicals who wanted revolutions to put an end to the kind of governments established in Europe in 1815. So, in France, Italy, Germany, and Russia, they became revolutionaries and worked to overthrow existing monarchs. Nationalists talked of revolutions that were to create nations where all citizens would have equal rights. After 1815, Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian nationalist, conspired with others to achieve this in Italy. Nationalists elsewhere, including India, read his writings. So, what is told here that nationalists firstly were the liberals and radicals. They wanted end of monarchies from countries like France, Italy, Germany, Russia, and Europe. In 1815, they talked about equal rights to all the citizens. So, covering the brief points, it was the beginning of industrial revolution. Men, women, and children were pushed into factories with low wages. Liberals and radicals were the factory owners, felt that efforts must be encouraged so that the benefits of industrialization should be passed on to workers. Now, coming to the socialism in Europe, the coming of socialism to Europe. Perhaps one of the most far reaching visions of how society should be structured was socialism. By the mid 19th century in Europe, socialism was a well known body of ideas that attracted widespread attention. So, now there is an important paragraph. Socialists were against private property and saw it as the root of all social ills of the time. Why? Individuals owned the property that gave employment, but the property were concerned only with personal gain and not with the welfare of those who made the property productive. So, if society as a whole, rather than single individuals, controlled property, more attention would be paid to collective social interest. Socialists wanted this change and campaigned for it. Now, how could a society without property operate? What would the basis of socialist society? Before that, let's try to understand this paragraph. So, what it had actually told that socialists actually believed that whosoever had the private properties were all was the root of at that all the problems that were causing at that time. Why they believe so? Because the individuals who owned the property gave the employment, but those who actually had the property, they were only concerned with their own personal gains and do not care that the others people's wages were okay or fine, or it was it the property productive or not, or the welfare is made to the people who are working there, those who are employed there. So if society as a whole rather than single individuals controlled property, more attention would be paid to collective social interest. So basically here socialism pattern was not followed. It was profits were and ownerships were not shared at a particular time period at that time. So therefore socialists wanted the change and campaigned for it. Now, how would a society with a property operate? What would be the basis of socialist society? So they wanted that the society, they wanted to change such that the society could be controlled by whole, rather than individuals, to pay more for collective social interest. So in the third paragraph here, socialists had different visions of future. Here it has been told about the three demands of socialists, that they are really really important, wherein we will be talking about Robert Owen, Louis Blanc, Karl Marx and all. So let us talk about it. So we will briefly analyze it by with the help of PPT. So socialists had different visions of the future. Robert Owen sought to build a cooperative community called New Harmony India in Indiana, USA. In France, Louis Blanc wanted the government to encourage cooperatives and replace capitalist enterprises. Socialists were okay, this we have already discussed. Okay, then some believed in cooperatives, some demanded governments must encourage cooperatives. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels added that industrial society was the capitalist. So, what were the Marx thoughts? Marx thought that capitalism would be replaced by a socialist collective where all were equal in ownership and rewards of production. Marx believed that a socialist society would free the workers from capitalism. This would be then a communist society. From the text as well, if we quickly look at the demands, so they added the other ideas to this body of arguments. Marx argued that industrial society was capitalist. Capitalist owned the capital invested in factories, and profit of capitalists was produced by workers. The conditions of workers could not improve as long as his profit was accumulated by a private capitalist. He was saying that if only one person individually is gaining all the profits and the ownership, then how would the society would develop? How it would be contributed to the society, and why will the society work in that? And then why will the people be interested in as long to get employed there when they do not earn any profits? So workers had to overthrow capitalism and rule of private property. Marx believed that to free themselves from capitalist exploitation, this all was referred to as capitalist exploitation, workers had to construct a radically socialist society where all property was socially controlled. This would be a communist society. He was convinced that workers would triumph in their conflict with the capitalist. A communist society was a natural society of the future. So we have just seen here that socialist society was in favor of cooperatives and communist society were in favor of workers. Just need to understand that. Now we will study about support for socialism. Before that, let's move on to the notes from the notebook. So this we have already discussed, that industrial socialists created a condition for change. Unemployment, poverty, poor hygiene, all property was with radicals and liberals. Then coming of socialism to in Europe, so property to be controlled by society as a whole, encourage cooperatives, that is association of people who produce goods together, divided the profits according to the work done. Karl Marx views. So Marx, he wanted to replace capitalism by communism. Capitalism actually exploited. Capitalism was exploitation on profit based, and communism was socialist society sharing of profits. Then we will talk about support of socialism after the text. For support of socialism, we will be talking about in the next part of the video. Thank you for watching.